Looney, that's always been there.
Trying to get out.
Okay, Dave. Oh, yeah.
Spirit of my silence, I can hear you, but I'm afraid to be near you, and I don't know where to begin, and I don't know where to begin. Somewhere in the desert, there's a forest, and a maker before us, but I don't know where to begin, but I don't know where to begin. Again, I lost my strength completely. Oh, be near me, tired old mare with the wind in your hair. Amethyst and flowers on the table. Is it real or a fable? Well, I suppose a friend is a friend, and we all know how this will end.
Okay, so it should be first obvious that I am not in Colorado anymore, if you can't tell by this swampy lake behind me. I am back in Florida. Secondly, I am definitely under the weather. I'm mildly sick, actually. So normally when I come to Florida or just exist in Florida, my sinuses definitely act up, which is what is happening. Thus, I'm going to sound under the weather, and I hope I can make it through this video without dying of coughing. So the whole reason this is kind of confusing and there's a time jump and I just magically ended up in Florida was because I didn't plan on making this video, but I felt like it didn't explain enough, and I felt like I had enough to say at the end of this to really talk about things. So Epson didn't sponsor this video, but they did lend me the photo scanner that I used throughout this video to scan my old images. And the reason this was so important is because last year, before I left, my plan was to digitize my own photos by laying them out in a grid and then taking photos of them with my camera. But I didn't get around to it, and I left. And a wildfire happened in December of last year in Colorado that was super devastating. I think it was the most destructive wildfire property damage-wise in the entire history of Colorado, and it happened. And that wildfire got, I wouldn't say super close, but it got close enough to where I started to worry about that box of photos that I had sitting in storage, to the point where I was like, man, I am gonna beat myself up a lot if something happens to those. So it put a lot of pressure on me to know that I absolutely needed to get those photos backed up, because honestly, they're some of the most important things, if not the most important items I own. A lot of the people in those photos are gone. And I've talked about that in the past on this channel, but they're the only tangible thing I have of, like, when I want to look back at my mom, or look back at my dad, or my grandparents, or my aunts. All of these people, they're the only ways I can interact with them. And it really puts a lot more significance into those photos, and I'm sure everyone watching this right now has photos like that. So when that wildfire happened, I was like, man, I cannot believe I didn't digitize them. But then also, when I got to Alaska and I started talking about my family and I started talking about material to deal with this journey of spreading my dad's ashes places, and if you missed any of that, you can check it out in this video, among many other videos where I talk about it. I don't have anything tangible to show you. I don't have anything to put on the screen that's like, here's what my childhood was like, or here's my family, or here's the people that I am talking about, because I didn't have a lot of digital versions of them. So this kind of killed two birds with one stone, was that not only did I get to back up and archive all of my family photos, it also meant I got to create the content that I will use for probably years of videos, where when I talk about things like this, like right now I'm probably putting some photos on the screen, it kind of just tells a story, and I didn't have that story fully complete without them. So I reached out to Epson, like I said, they sent me the scanner, and honestly it was super wonderful to use. It's a really cool product that is pretty small. It scans all your 4x6s, 5x7s, and some of the, I'm not going to do like a formal review on this, I'm just going to tell you my thoughts. So one thing that it really does is that if you have writing on the back of your photos, I read that it detected the writing, but I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to go through and separate all these photos out and pick out the ones that have writing and then tell it to scan the ones that... No, I didn't have to do any of that. It automatically can detect if there's writing on the back of the photo, and then it'll scan it. So for the 1,000 photos that I had, only a few of them had writing, and it only made the back images for those photos. So not only was that a space saver, it's also a time saver. Another great thing is that if some of these photos are so important that you kind of worry about the thought of like scanning them through a feed scanner rather than a flatbed scanner. But the design of the way this works is that it goes through, and if something gets stuck, when you pull off the front of it, it's basically just like a really large flatbed scanner, but it has rollers on it to move the photo through it. And what this means is that if something gets stuck, or if it gets caught, or it stops, when you pull off the front to unjam it, it's totally different than unjamming a printer. Your photo is perfectly safe, and there's no issues. But I will admit, I barely had any jams. I must have had, out of the 1,000 photos I scanned, I think I may have had 3 troublesome photos. 1 was stuck together, and 2 other ones just had weird corners where all I had to do was flip it around and it scanned just fine. And it did it flawlessly. That was something that was amazing. I mean, if you take your own stack of photos and try to separate them yourself with your fingers, it can be pretty difficult sometimes. And I thought that it did a really good job of that. Those are the kind of things I worried about. And the last thing was image quality. Hey, pardon the interruption. I made the deliberate choice not to monetize this video because I thought that song in the intro part was so important that it made sense to just not monetize it. So if you want to support me in more ways than liking and subscribing to this channel, there's a little support link down below where you can find things like the 2023 calendar. It is still 2022, so you still have time to get it and still use it for the whole year. You can also check out things like my Lightroom companion if you missed any of those videos, or a myriad of other ways to support me. Anyways, let's get back to the video, and thank you for watching. So you can pick the DPI, 300, 600, or 1200 DPI. I picked the highest DPI at JPEG. I did test it versus the TIFF, but the TIFF files were 10 times the size, and when I looked at the images, zoomed in, I even +2 EV'd and -2 EV'd the images just to see if it was retaining any more dynamic range in those TIFFs. I couldn't tell a difference. So I just went JPEG, archived all 1,000-ish photos at about, I want to say, at 1200 DPI, it was 5,000-ish by 3,000 pixels on those 4x6s, which is pretty large for turning a 4x6 image into a digital image. And there's a lot of data there, but realistically, it was just easy. Once I had all the photos sorted by size, which is something you'll have to do, I just went through and scanned everything probably in less than 2 hours. I did 1,000 photos in less than 2 hours. Absolutely amazing. Cannot thank Epson enough for sending that to me. But honestly, even if they didn't send it to me, I would tell you exactly what I thought. And I really found no flaws with the actual product. It did a really good job scanning everything. It fed everything through really well, much better than I even expected it to. I had no jamming issues or anything like that, and it did everything better than I even thought it would, which is always a great, result of a product. I will say the only thing that I don't like about this is it's expensive. I think it's originally $700, and then it's on sale for like $500, which, digitizing your photos is priceless, but the problem is, the way that I look at this is that if I bought it and I scanned all my images, then what do I do with it? So I've actually thought of 2 solutions for that. So one, if I were to buy this myself, something I could do is just buy it, do all of my images, and then resell it. So let's say I bought it for $500, scanned all my images, sold it used, like new, for $350. I'm totally fine paying that much for the product and what the results I got were. The other thing you could do that I think is more beneficial is that if you have a family, if you have cousins or aunts or uncles or brothers or sisters, and you guys want to all go in and digitize all of your photos together, that's something you could do. So you buy it, you give it to one family member, they scan all their images, you give it to another family member, they scan all of their images. And I think both of those ways are far more practical, at least for me from a buying standpoint, because I think that was my barrier to entry when I looked at it was, well, back when I looked at buying it, it was $700. And I was like, I can't justify $700 on this thing that I'm only going to use once. But when you start to really think about buying it and then reselling it once you're done, that recoups most of the cost. Or buying it and splitting the cost between a bunch of people, whether it's friends or family, and doing it that way. Regardless, I thought the product was amazing, but reality is what's really amazing is the results, is I now have all those photos. Man, I cannot believe there's still bugs out here. It is December. I now have all those images digitized, and it feels great to have them digitized. That peace of mind, they're in the cloud, I'll have them forever in some capacity. And not only that, but I can share them with the rest of my family members that are still here that also love those memories, which is really cool. I can put them on a Google Drive and then send them out, and they have all of them. And if they did that with all their images using the same thing, we'd have an entire repository of a bunch of memories, and I would see a bunch of photos that I didn't even know existed. When we go to Argentina and I want to tell stories about camping with my parents, I got photos to show now. I got visual representations of the goofball that was my dad or the goofball that was my mom, because they were both that way. Anyways, if you want to buy the Epson scanner down below, I will have it linked. Definitely check it out. And thank you, Epson, for loaning this unit. It means the world to me to be able to digitize those photos. And I think that was representative of the emotions you saw when I was going through these photos. Anyways, as always, if you want to like the video, like it. Consider subscribing if you love this kind of content. And I've got a lot of cool content on the way. So this is actually coming out earlier than a bunch of stuff. I got to kayak around a lake similar to this for 4 or 5 days, taking photos that I think you're going to enjoy. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you on the next one. Later. Should I like or subscribe to this channel?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.